Ladies and gentlemen, please do welcome on stage Stephanie Martin.
When it comes to ticking the diversity box, you could probably say that I am the perfect candidate. I am the daughter of South African immigrant parents, so that's a tick for culture. I'm brown in skin tone, but not too brown. A comfortable shade, just enough to tick the representation box. I'm female, tick for gender. Western educated, tick. Speaks English in a Western accent, double tick. So you see, on paper, I tick all the right boxes. And when I moved to Dubai to start a career in international education, I thought, yeah, this will be easy. It's a multicultural place. I'm pretty multicultural myself. Honestly, though, I had no clue. I knew about 3 things. There'd be sand and camels, that I should dress modestly, and summer was going to be hot. Like the kind of hot where even your bones start to sweat. What I wasn't prepared for, though, is the fact that I was going to be praised by people before I'd even had to prove myself. And it wasn't for my expertise. It wasn't for my diversity. You want to know what I was admired for? My passport. I still remember one of the first conversations I had with a colleague. He asked where I was from. I told him. My parents were South African, but I'd been raised and educated in Australia. And before I could even finish my sentence, he looks at me like I'd said I was the chosen one. And he says, "You are going to do very well here." And then another more senior colleague who was listening in on the conversation, he gave me the nod. And he says, "Australia? You know what you're doing then?" I was pleasantly confused. I hadn't even started my first day on the job, and yet I'd already earned their trust just because of my passport. What would they have said if my passport was from somewhere else? So that was the first time that I'd ever really been introduced to this idea of passport privilege. And it was the first time that I'd also seen how sometimes leaders can seek what's comfortable and praise what's familiar. So what I want to share today is that if we keep rewarding people for being the same, instead of seeking difference, then we end up with rooms full of yes people, group thinkers. We surround ourselves with those who reflect our own ideals instead of seeking what Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop calls windows, new voices, new opportunities, new ways forward. You see, rewarding sameness and conformity isn't leadership. And the greatest leaders, they seek windows, not mirrors. And when they do that, they give others the opportunity to thrive in their own difference. Now, as an international educator, in one of my first classes, I had about 14 students. 12 of them were from countries outside the UAE, mostly bilingual, and about 12 of them spoke Arabic as a first language. Now, this was nothing new to me, because I'd come from a South African family who could speak in many different dialects: Zulu, Xhosa, Afrikaans, and English. So I asked my line manager, I said, "What do we do when the students speak their own languages in the classroom? How do we know whether they're on task?" And the response stopped me in my tracks. Because I was told that this is the policy, that this is an international school. And so therefore Arabic was not to be spoken in the classroom. In fact, it was made pretty clear, English only. So I sat with that for a second. And I thought, hang on, am I a newcomer to this country who doesn't speak the language, going to now tell those who do speak the language to abandon it and speak what's more preferred by me? It made no sense. But like many of us, when we are young in our career, desperate to please, I followed the rule anyway. And the next time someone spoke Arabic, I didn't just correct them, no. I went into full educator mode on them. I made a lesson out of it. And I explained that English is what we call a lingua franca. It's the common language. So we should speak to a man in the language that he understands, because that's what we're told, right? But as those words left my mouth, I was instantly reminded of the education experience that my own parents had growing up in South Africa under the apartheid regime. You see, it was a time where native African languages were banned in classrooms. In fact, you could only speak two Eurocentric languages, English or Afrikaans, both the languages of the colonizer. Now, different contexts, yes. But I couldn't unsee the pattern because I was standing in a country where the national language was Arabic, and yet not one person had asked me as a prerequisite if I spoke it. Instead, the system asked others to adapt to me, to fit inside my box. Nobody questioned, everybody just followed. So it got me thinking, have we mistaken the idea of globalisation for Westernisation? And in doing so, are we subconsciously sending the message that difference is too difficult, that it's a compromise rather than an asset? Now, when it comes to language, here's what we as leaders might forget. You see, language isn't just sounds, it's codes, it's access. And if you have ever traveled to a country before where you didn't speak the language and you had to mime chicken just to order off the menu, that's a true story, by the way. I have done this. Then you know the feeling, right? Because there's a breakdown in understanding between you and the other person simply because you both don't share the same code. And if we want to lead, if we want to connect, then we need to understand the codes that our people live by. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, what's the big deal? English is a universal language. But you see, that's where I think we get it wrong, because English, apart from our rules and our exceptions to the rule, is what we call a low cultural context language. We pretty much say what we mean. But languages like Arabic, like Zulu, like Japanese, are high cultural context languages. Meaning lives beyond just the word. It lives in the gesture, the eye contact, the tone, the history that lives inside the word. And I learned this pretty quickly in Dubai when it comes to the word inshallah. Now, in its literal context, inshallah means if God wills it, it's sacred. But depending on who's saying it, it could mean inshallah, yes, it's going to happen. Or inshallah, inshallah. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Not in this lifetime, anyway. So when we want to lead others, we cannot lead unless we understand their cultural background. Now, all of this made me question, what kind of leader do I want to be? Do I want to be the kind who blindly enforces rules that make no sense? Or the kind who asks, why are these systems here in the first place? And what purpose does it serve? Progress? Or just another box-ticking exercise? But sometimes it's easier said than done, right? And for a while, even I got stuck. I got stuck in this cycle of people-pleasing, of echoing other leaders, thinking that that was leadership. I became a palatable version of myself. She was polished, she was pleasant, she was digestible. She tamed her hair, she tamed her voice, said, yeah, sure, a lot. And instead of seeking change, I sought validation. I sought to be liked, to be agreeable, to be a mirror. I made myself small enough to fit inside the box because being in the box felt safe. Until it got suffocating. And so I had to ask myself, well, where did all of this come from? This need to blend in, to play nice. And what I learned is, like many of our traits, this was generational. My parents grew up in an apartheid regime that put people in literal boxes. Black, white, coloured, and Indian. It was one of the most effective brainwashing caste systems of its era because it taught people of colour to idolise the Western way. Because the lighter your skin, the greater your privilege. And you didn't want to stand out any more than your skin tone already did, so you chose to adapt and to play by the rules. My own mother once tried to tell a bus driver that she was Portuguese, just so that she could sit on the same bus as white South Africans. And growing up, raising us in Australia as kids, she said that all she'd ever wanted was for us to fit in. She never wanted anyone to look at us as just those brown children. My father said that he'd always felt this constant push, this need to prove himself, to prove that he was just as capable as his white colleagues. And in a different way, I inherited that same push. The need to perform for a system and be accepted for a gold star. My grandmothers, Elaine and Louise, they carried it too. They always worked hard to ensure that our families were one step ahead, regardless of being seen as second-rate for the colour of their skin. So they spoke the right language and adopted the right accent, because sounding Western automatically meant better. But see, if you have spent your whole life trying to fit in, then you sacrifice the chance to stand out. And the greatest leaders, the trailblazers, the change makers of our time, they did not revolutionize the world by choosing to follow the status quo and fit inside a box. They chose to break it and to build their own. See, if you've been conditioned to perform for approval, to adapt, to keep the peace, then you don't challenge the system, ladies and gentlemen. You just maintain it. And in too many of our organizations, that is exactly what gets rewarded. The ones who nod along, who are agreeable, they're seen as team players. But the ones who ask the hard questions, well, they're labeled difficult. And what's the solution that our system provides? Play by the rules, blend in, and you'll be rewarded. You see, the truth is, modern leadership, it doesn't need more titles. It doesn't need more corner offices, more power. It needs more heart, more integrity. Because as we've seen from recent world events, leadership without action is just a badge. And if we keep rewarding sameness, then all we're doing is performing. We are not leading. So what do? Well, we ace it. The first thing, audit. Audit your circle. Are you surrounded by people who just reflect your opinions, or are there people on your team who genuinely help you expand and grow? A second thing, check yourself. Check your comfort bias. Before your next hire or your next promotion, ask, am I choosing who's comfortable and safe, or who's going to help us grow? And the third is elevate difference. Find the barriers that silence your powerful voices and break them. Because the ones who ask the hard questions, they hold the key to real change. Now, why does any of this matter? Well, it matters because in 2025, our leadership structures are still struggling with what I call sameness syndrome. It lingers in our systems, in the way that we dilute accents and truths, in the way that we continue to reward sameness. Because if we don't look the same, we're taught to sound the same. As a communications strategist, I teach leaders how to shift rooms and leave an impact whenever they speak. And last year, a woman in leadership came to me and she said, I want to get better at speaking. So I said to her, okay, which part? She said, it's my voice. I want to change it. I asked her why. She said, well, it's my accent. It's too strong. People say they can't understand me. So I looked at her and I said, I'm sorry, I can't coach you. She wanted to know why. And I said to her, your accent is your voice. When you speak not just for you, but for the ancestors who came before you who perhaps couldn't. You see, leadership is not about mimicking a voice that others feel comfortable hearing you in. It's about teaching them to understand your voice. And it's our job, all of us here, to learn how to listen. You see, familiar doesn't equal excellence. The leadership of the future can't be based on assimilation. It must be redefined as culturally responsive, where diversity isn't just some annual celebration. It's a daily expectation. So if, like me, you have spent years trying to fit inside the box, then start here. Don't change your accent. Own it. Don't erase your language. Honor it. Don't dismiss difference. Challenge sameness. And don't dilute your truth. Speak it. Because the greatest leaders, they do not fill the room with more mirrors. They seek difference. They build windows. Thank you.